And we start with the president on the defensive over accusations he is a racist amid new concerns about a DACA deal. Good morning to you on this Monday. I'm John Scott.
And I'm Melissa Francis. President Trump now denying that he made disparaging remarks about Haitian and African nations during an Oval Office meeting with members of Congress. That was last week, insisting that he is not a racist. Plus, when it comes to efforts to protect the Dreamers, he's now blaming the Democrats, saying that they are the reason there is no agreement, tweeting, honestly, I don't think the Democrats want to make a deal. They talk about DACA, but they don't want to help. We are ready, willing, and able to make a deal, but they don't want to. They don't want security at the border. They don't want... There you go. It just keeps going. Yeah. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is live with the story. Oh, John, where are we on this?
Well, I can tell you one thing, Melissa. We're miles away from where we were about a week ago at this time. Remember, last Tuesday, the president had that meeting here at the White House. 22 members of Congress. Almost the entire thing was televised, and everybody sounded like, hey, we're very close to a DACA deal here. This should be very easy to do. But listen to what the president is tweeting now. Quote, DACA is probably dead because the Democrats don't really want it. They just want to talk and take desperately needed money away from our military. At Mar-a-Lago yesterday, going out to dinner with the House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy, the president denied, as you pointed out at the top, that he made the racist statements in his Oval Office meeting with several members of Congress, including Senator Dick Durbin, and instead pointed the finger at Democrats for holding up a deal on DACA. Listen here.
No, I'm not a racist. I am the least racist person you have ever interviewed. Honestly, I don't think the Democrats want to make a deal. I think they talk about DACA, but they don't want to help the DACA people. They don't want security at the border. We have people pouring in. They don't want security at the border. They don't want to stop drugs. And they want to take money away from our military, which we cannot do.
So again, the president denying that he ever used the word S-hole in that Oval Office meeting. And now two senators who were in that meeting, Senator Perdue of Georgia and Cotton of Arkansas, doubling down on a statement they released last week in which they said they didn't recall the president using the word S-hole, now saying definitively he didn't say it. Listen here.
I'm telling you he did not use that word, George, and I'm telling you it's a gross misrepresentation. How many times do you want me to say that?
I certainly didn't hear what Senator Durbin has said repeatedly. Senator Durbin has a history of misrepresenting what happens in White House meetings, though, so perhaps we shouldn't be surprised by that. I didn't hear it, and I was sitting no further away from Donald Trump than Dick Durbin was.
So, Melissa, another troubling development that shows you how far away we are from where we were about a week ago. President Trump now says he can't say whether there's going to be a government shutdown. This time last week, officials at the White House were quite confident that they were going to get a continuing resolution to prevent a government shutdown on the 19th. That's this coming Friday. Now it looks like that's in question. The goal had been to get a continuing resolution and then work out all of the details about DACA and the budget in between that time that the new continuing resolution went into place and then the time it expired, probably sometime in February. But all of that now is up in the air, Melissa.
My goodness, this is why we come to work every day, because it changes every single day.
That's why you never even go out for lunch around here.
No, can't do it. All right, thank you, my friend. Meanwhile, the showdown over immigration is ramping up on Capitol Hill with the deadline fast approaching on passing a spending bill. The president is blaming Democrats for failing to reach a deal on the Dreamers.
Honestly, I don't think the Democrats want to make a deal. I think they talk about DACA, but they don't want to help the DACA people. Now, we used to say the DACA children, but the children aren't children. I think you have a lot of sticking points, but they're all Democrat sticking points. Because we are ready, willing, and able to make a deal, but they don't want to.
Joining me now is Republican Congressman Jody Arrington of Texas. He is a member of the House Budget, Veterans Affairs, and Agriculture Committees. Sir, thank you for joining us. Where is the sticking points right now? I mean, what are some of the specific issues that everyone's hung up on?
Well, I think the president's right. I think the main sticking point is that the Democrats, you have to have a willing partner, and they've got to come to the table serious about putting the American people first in this negotiation. That's the only way to negotiate
so what makes you, I'm trying to drill down on sort of the difference between the words and the actions, because there are so many accusations and words flying around. It's very difficult to parse through. Is there something, are they literally not showing up to sit down and talk? Are they asking for something that's so outrageous you can't possibly do it? I mean, where are we really?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, nobody's interested in amnesty. People want to know that their safety and security, American people want to know that their safety and security is first and foremost in these discussions. It's not that we aren't willing to give certainty and some legal status to these DACA recipients, but that we need to make sure that once and for all we shut the border down from this inflow of illegal immigration and that we enforce the laws. I mean, it's sad that we have to talk about passing laws to enforce the laws that are already on the books, but we've got to prevent a situation where you have a rogue activist president like Obama that will put us in a situation where we're back here working out a mess that was created, again, by a president and quite frankly, courts that have no respect for rule of law. So we've got to get that part right first.
Yeah.
And then I know I'm willing, and I know most of my colleagues on the Republican side are willing to give certainty, not amnesty, but legal status to these folks, most of whom were brought here by no fault of their own, no doubt.
If I can hear what you're saying, I mean, you're talking about you want some sort of border security first, and it seems like we made progress last week when the president bent over backwards during that meeting to change his language to wall system, from wall to wall system. And I watched the thing live. He probably said 7 or 8 times, no, of course we don't mean that we're going to have a wall end to end. There are some places where you don't need it. We're talking about more border security. And that sounded like something that everyone on both sides has claimed they would agree to, that Democrats also want more border security and have voted for it in the past. They don't like this idea of calling it a wall and making it like the Great Wall of China. And he seemed to concede that that wasn't what that was all about. Is all that progress gone?
I don't think it is. I mean, we need whatever tools and resources to make to truly secure the border, and some of that is physical barriers, but they're having enough boots on the ground. We also passed Kate's Law and other bills out of the House, like no sanctuary for criminal aliens. We just recently watched on the news as you had a guy that was deported 5 times hijacking a bus. And so we have to have measures in place to ensure the enforcement of the law in the interior of the U.S., not just border security. This should be a basic, fundamental issue that we could cover before we get to the DACA folks and then start talking about what we expect there, like that they have a job, that we don't have criminals, that they get in the back of the line so we respect people who have gone through the legal channels, and that we stop things like chain migration and things that are not helpful to and have, quite frankly, devalued citizenship in this country.
How far apart are you on those issues? Because you're not talking about, Democrats kind of throw out this idea they want to round people up and send them home, and that's not what I heard you saying just now, and that's not what we've heard the president saying. It's about establishing some way to stay, but that isn't automatic citizenship out of the gate, that there is a process, there are ways to qualify. Are you any closer, Democrats and Republicans, on that? Because that, too, when you really drill down on what we're talking about, that also doesn't sound like it's that far apart.
It isn't. And I'm telling you in my conversation with colleagues, again, we don't want to deport DACA. I'm not interested in deporting the DACA recipients, but we're not interested in granting amnesty to them or their parents. We want to respect the rule of law and those who waited in line and are still in line for their citizenship. We want to give them some certainty. We don't want them looking over their shoulder constantly and in fear of being deported. But we want to make sure, again, that we have the commitment from Democrats, because we don't have the votes in the Senate, to secure the border and stop illegal immigration once and for all. That's what we're asking up front, to deal with benevolently, as we have as a country, with these folks who have come here on account of their parents.
Congressman, it must be very frustrating to you, because it seems like you guys get very close when you talk about the details, and then all of a sudden the words kind of blow up into crazy town, and we're, off on the, we've gotten off the rails again. Good luck to you. I hope you can sort it out. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Melissa.
Isn't that the definition of Washington? Crazy town?
I think so. Crazy town.
President Trump takes another jab at one of his favorite punching bags, the media, as a Republican senator compares his treatment of the press to one of the most notorious dictators in history. So what's behind the president's latest feud with the media? Our panel on that next. Plus, the California mudslides going from bad to worse and a growing death toll. That story still to come.
It is a little frustrating. It's martial law here, basically. You know, there are looters being caught, and there's so many gawkers and people that just have no business being in here.
Well, I guess you could call it a war of word in the president's latest fight against what he likes to call fake news, with Mr. Trump going after the Wall Street Journal over a single word in a statement he made to the paper during an interview about the North Korea crisis. The president claims he said, quote, "I'd have a great relationship with Kim Jong-un." But here's the audio of the interview the paper released.
As you know, I have a great relationship with Prime Minister Abe, Japan. And I probably have a very good relationship with Kim Jong-un of North Korea.
So the president says he said, "I'd have a good relationship." The paper quotes him as saying, "I have a good relationship." Joining us now, Vince Colanese, editorial director of the Daily Caller. Judy Miller is a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter, author, and Fox News contributor. So, ignoring the old advice that you should never pick a fight with someone who buys their ink by the barrel, the president, Judy, has chosen to fight the Wall Street Journal on this. It is kind of hard to tell what he said, though, in his defense, whether he said "I" or "I'd."
Right, it is, and people hear what they want to hear, as we do know. But the fact of the matter is, there were 4 reporters in the room with tape recorders, all of whom heard this statement that he had a good relationship. And the full transcript of the interview, which the Wall Street Journal released, suggests that the president said he had a good relationship, because the reporter was mystified. One of the 4 was mystified by this and said, "Wait a minute, have you even met him?" And then the president refused to say whether or not he had met Kim Jong-un or not. But, you know, this is just vintage Trump. I mean, why don't we get used to it at this point? Wouldn't you rather talk about whether or not you've said "I" or "I'd" than Stormy Daniels, or the fact that your base might be unhappy about your decision to stick for a while longer with the Iran deal? I mean, the president sets the agenda. He creates these deflections and distractions, and we fall for it almost all the time.
But also, Vince, it has the net effect of stepping on the accomplishments that he has made. I mean, the tax deal, the ink was barely dry on that tax deal, and all of a sudden, you know, the president tweets something out that gets everybody talking about something else.
Yeah, well, no reason to buy ink by the barrel when the tweets are free, and the president does them a lot. I mean, no nail rather is too small for him to hit. The Wall Street Journal, a big newspaper, I think for the most part, I think the president would probably agree, has reported on him rather fairly. And by the way, if you're going to assess this conversation, who better to clarify it than the guy whose mouth it came from in the first place? So in the end, you know, even in the first version of this, him saying, "I probably have a good relationship," or "I probably have a good relationship," both of those are speculative about the nature of his relationship with Kim Jong-un.
So the tie goes to the runner, and in this case, the runner is the president.
That's right.
That's how you see it, Vince?
You got it. That's exactly right.
All right. Here's another event we can look forward to this week, as tweeted by the president. The Fake News Awards, those going to the most corrupt and biased of the mainstream media, will be presented to the losers on Wednesday, January 17th, rather than this coming Monday. This tweet went out a while ago. The interest in and importance of these awards is far greater than anyone could have anticipated. So that was January 7th. So we've got the Fake News Awards coming up this week, Judy. There have been mistakes made in coverage of this president.
Yes, there have been, and a lot of reporters don't like Donald Trump. We know that. It's absolutely clear from the coverage, from the editorials. But the fact of the matter is that those of us in the news media who try and be fair to the president are still wondering why he hasn't, as you pointed out, far, and I'm not a particular fan of Mr. Trump's, but black unemployment, here we are on Martin Luther King Day, is at an all-time low. Unemployment is at an all-time low. The stock market is at an all-time high. Companies are giving bonuses. There's so much that he could talk about. Instead, he's attacking the media. And I continue to be mystified about how he thinks this expands his support, and the polls would suggest it does quite the opposite.
The same day that the president is handing out the fake news awards, Vince, outgoing Arizona Senator Jeff Flake is going to be giving a speech. He conveniently released a transcript to the Associated Press, and in that speech, again, the outgoing Arizona senator, who has feuded with this president, compares President Trump to Stalin. What do you think about that comparison?
I think it's ridiculous. I mean, Joseph Stalin murdered millions of people. I don't think you can sort of make the case that the president of the United States is emotionally unstable while simultaneously comparing him to a genocidal dictator. I don't think that's an even comparison by any means, and it suggests more about the person who's saying it than the person he's trying to attack here. The president sends mean tweets. That's the problem that Jeff Flake has, and to compare him to Joseph Stalin is ridiculous.
Well, Judy, go ahead.
I don't think he's doing that. I think he's comparing the president's use of the term enemy of the people to something that Stalin said and that Khrushchev said was so over the top that even he wouldn't permit it to be used. I mean, I don't think he's comparing the president to Stalin.
Well, he's definitely comparing the two. And here's the point. I think all of these pushbacks that the president gives to the American press is, I think, a good thing in the end result, because what it forces consumers to do is be more media literate, to examine what they're reading and assess what's true. Don't just believe it reflexively. Assess whether or not it's true. And I think that's having a good effect, despite the fact that many reporters are very upset by the president of the United States.
Just last week, when the argument was just beginning to boil over the president's reported characterization of some countries that provide immigrants to this country, a couple of reporters tweeted out that ambassadors were resigning to protest what the president had said, Judy. Turned out that wasn't the case. The one resignation had been turned in back in December. Supposedly the ambassador to Haiti resigned, and we don't even have an ambassador to Haiti at this moment in time.
Right. Well, no, look, nobody ever said we're perfect. I would never say that about myself or many of the people that call ourselves journalists. But once again, you have to understand that an attack on the press and a free and independent press is an attack on a pillar of our democracy. Yeah, we're not perfect, but we go out there every day and try and do a job. And I think the president could spend his time much more productively than attacking us.
My last thought here is, there's no comparison between President Trump and the prior administration based on treatment of the press. President Obama spied on a Fox News reporter, seized the phone records of the Associated Press, and constantly turned down transparency requests by reporters. There is no comparison to the way these two presidents have behaved when it comes to reporters. This current president just says things out loud.
But there is a difference in the way the press regards those two presidents.
That's true.
Absolutely.
We will agree on that.
We will.
Judy Miller, Vince Colonnese, thank you both.
Thank you, John.
Southern California is still reeling from deadly mudslides as more bodies are recovered. Why the hope of finding any more survivors now is fading. Meanwhile, temperatures plummeting again in the Northeast, causing significant icing in the Hudson River. Now the Coast Guard is issuing warnings. Rick Leventhal has a live report.
And we're on the bridge of the Coast Guard cutter Penobscot Bay. This is an ice-breaking tug, and we're heading north up the Hudson River from New York City toward Albany. You can see some ice out there on the river. It's a lot worse where we're going, and we'll tell you exactly why the Coast Guard needs to be out here coming up.
Residents in Santa Barbara County still reeling from the deadly mudslides that ravaged that area, holding a candlelight vigil to remember the victims and praying that those still missing are found. Officials now say 20 people are dead and at least 4 people are still missing. Authorities announcing their mission is shifting from search and rescue to search and recovery, diminishing the likelihood of finding any more survivors.
Temperatures in the Northeast plummeting again over the weekend, causing rivers to jam with ice. Now the U.S. Coast Guard is on a mission to break through that ice to clear critical shipping lanes. Rick Leventhal is live on a Coast Guard cutter traveling up the Hudson River. Rick.
And Melissa, let me start by saying it's really cold. out here. We're on the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Penobscot Bay. We're heading north up the Hudson River. This is a 140-foot ice-breaking tug that we're riding toward Kingston and Albany, which is many miles north of us. There is a stretch of some 55 miles in that area that is completely iced over. And the mission of the Coast Guard is to clear a path for passenger ferries and commercial fishing vessels and cargo ships, primarily oil tankers. What you're looking at right now, the ice in the river, this is pretty bad, but ships could get through it. What we're heading towards is solid ice, and that's what they need to break up to let those oil tankers carrying the heating oil keep folks warm during this frigid, cold winter. Some 90% of the heating oil that's used in the Northeast is actually carried by barges and ships here on the Hudson River. So that's according to the U.S. Coast Guard, which says if it's cold enough for this river to freeze over, they will be out here every day cutting through this ice. We can hear more from the captain of this vessel, Chris Valdez.
Wipe this off for me with your glove.
Every night, the ice refreezes on the Hudson, and the barges can't get through that ice. So every day, the Coast Guard has to go out and groom these tracks and ensure that the barges, the commerce flow up the Hudson River doesn't stop. We have some drone footage that was shot last week of the Coast Guard out breaking up ice along a stretch of river that we're headed to right now. And you can probably see just how bad things are up here. It's very unusual for them to have this much ice this early in the winter. Last year, they really didn't have any problems with the ice. It was much warmer. This year, obviously, a lot colder and a lot worse. And they have a system on these ships called a bubbler system that actually forces bubbles up from underneath the ship to reduce the friction on the ice and allow these cutters to make a better path through the ice. They say that they're going to do about 15 miles of ice cutting today and then about 45 miles a day every day for the next couple of weeks. And then another crew comes in to do what this crew is doing. And they're going to keep keeping these shipping lanes open so these cargo ships and fishing vessels can keep getting through and doing the work they need to do. And I don't know if you heard that, but we're hitting some pretty big chunks right now. And it's, like I said, it's going to be a rougher ride as we move further north.
That is so cool. I've seen them out there doing that, but obviously not up close like that. It's amazing to see what it looks like from right there. Go back inside, get warm. Rick Leventhal, thank you. Maine also dealing with ice jam after heavy rain and freezing temperatures caused the Kennebec River to flood. This is just one of several side streets in Augusta overrun with ice and water. Businesses reporting waters as high as 3 to 8 feet. Then there's and that was in Hallowell, Maine. This is parking lot that now looks like, look at that, a body of water. That's a parking lot. According to officials, 15 to 20 vehicles were either completely submerged or they were encased in ice. So all of this, no matter how cold you are right now, it could be worse.
Maybe Rick can take that Coast Guard cutter over to the parking lot and they can help get rid of some of that. Wow.
Wow.
What
Look
a mess.
at that. I used to live in Maine. It was very chilly. It was in the winter.
They are hardy folk up there,
chilly.
but nobody likes to have a flood like that to deal with.
No. Wow. All right.
Republicans are expressing new concerns about the midterm elections and their party's prospects amid growing fears of a Democratic wave. So what does the political landscape look like for the GOP? Our panel on deck with that. Plus, Greyhound passengers taking on a terrifying ride that prompts a high-speed police chase as we get disturbing new details about the suspect in custody.
Mr. Vargas Rosas, the 33-year-old, has been in our country illegally and, in fact, was deported some time ago back to Mexico. And by virtue of his actions last night, you see he's back and threatening to kill Americans.
A Greyhound bus ride turns into a terrifying ordeal, and now one of the passengers is under arrest for allegedly threatening other riders on the bus trip from Milwaukee to Chicago. The incident sparked a police pursuit that ended in northern Illinois. Officers throwing down spike strips to blow out the bus's tires. Authorities later saying the suspect is an illegal immigrant who was previously deported 5 times. Matt Finn, live from our Chicago bureau with more on that. Matt?
John, the bus left Wisconsin bound for Chicago Friday night, and shortly after its departure, it became very scary. Police tell us at least 2 passengers on board called 911 about this illegal immigrant, Margarito Vargas Rosas. They say he was pacing back and forth, going to shoot and kill everyone and reaching towards his waistband. Then, to make this ride even more horrifying for passengers, when police cars caught up to the bus and attempted to pull it over, the bus driver did not stop. Police had to put down 2 separate spike strips. Police say the driver was clearly confused and might have thought the police were there to assist him versus pulling him over. Here's what one of the passengers aboard and a responding deputy had to say.
He was just acting crazy. It almost felt like a terrorist situation because you're on a bus, you know, and the guy's saying he's got a gun.
We dodged a bullet. We really did, in my view.
When police finally got the bus to stop, the illegal immigrant was ordered off it by gunpoint and arrested. Fortunately, he did not have a weapon and no one was hurt. The little we know about this illegal immigrant is that he does not have legal status in the United States and was deported to Mexico.
Richard Fowler and Mark Lauder, former special assistant to the president and press secretary to Vice President Pence. Thanks to both of you for joining us.
Thank you, Melissa.
You know, Mark, I heard someone say over the weekend that this could be the first election, you know, ever where people don't vote on the economy and don't vote on their wallet. And I thought, I kind of doubt it. I don't know. I mean, doesn't the economy rule at the end of the day?
Generally speaking, there have been a few elections that have been more national security focused in the past, but generally speaking, people vote their wallets, and that's why I think Republicans are in a good position heading to 2018. Look, it's going to be a historical challenge, we know that, but when you look at the economy, the historic highs in the stock market, historic lows in unemployment, African American unemployment, Hispanic unemployment, millions of jobs being created and millions of Americans getting bonuses and raises because of the tax cut plan, that's a good position for the Republicans to be in.
Richard, you know, when different controversies crop up, the president said this, he didn't say this, you know, the whole back and forth, it seems like perhaps it doesn't change people's mind about how they feel about him, you know, but it does rub off on those around him and on the rest of his party as people decide, do I want to reinforce this or do I want to put a check on this? What do you think of that theory?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you're exactly right that people try to put a check on what they don't like. The good news for Republicans that there is a stock market high. The question now is will the president and will his policies be felt by everyday Americans? And beyond feeling it, he has to campaign on that. And I think that's going to be the hard part for this president, Melissa, because over and over again, he's constantly embroiled in these small miniature conflicts about what he said, what he didn't say, and that takes away from the Republican message. It takes away from party unity. And it makes it a lot easier for Democrats to make a case that this guy is unstable and Republicans aren't getting anything done in Washington.
But Mark, on the flip side of that, because that is accurate, but he was also battling Steve Bannon from the right, and he was also battling people, you know, within his own party, and he has eliminated one of those threats. So it's not like you're going to have Bannon out there having something happen like what happened in Alabama, no?
No, I think that's right. But you also have to remember, too, these elections are going to come down to the 2 names or multiple names on the ballot. So right now there's a lot of speculation in terms of generic ballots and general feelings. But when it comes to candidate A, who supports tax cuts, who wants who wants tougher security, versus candidate B, who wants higher taxes and slower growth and a weaker defense, those are very powerful positions to be in. And the other thing that's really important to remember is that Republicans have about a 2-to-1 cash advantage right now in terms of their fundraising efforts, so they are going to have the means to be able to get their message out, while Democrats are still trying to pay off debt from previous elections.
Well, let me make one point here, Melissa, and I think it's a very valuable point to make, is that one is it's also going to matter what happens on the ground, right? All politics are local. And if you look at the Virginia governor's race and the Virginia, you know, that the Virginia Democrats almost took over the House of Delegates, what you saw there is they found candidates that can run in these particular districts and run very well. If Democrats can do that again in 2018, and we're sort of seeing the signs that they will do that, this is going to be trouble for Republicans when you have a lot of retirements and the name ID goes away. Then it's the Trump's guy versus this guy who's lived here for a long time, who knows our community, who knows our neighborhood. The guy who knows the neighborhood knows the community wins every time.
Yeah, so you're saying it comes down to who's actually on the ballot. Good insight. You're right about that. Gentlemen, thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John.
Well, the widespread panic over the weekend caused by the false missile alarm sent to residents and tourists in Hawaii, triggering concerns about U.S. readiness for a real threat. We'll discuss it with our next guest, a former commander of the 7th Fleet.
This was a mistake on our part, but don't let that stop as far as the preparation and the warning time if this happens for real.
New information on the chaos and confusion in Hawaii over the weekend after the false alarm about an incoming missile strike. That's highlighting the very real threat from North Korea. Here's Hawaii Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard.
I've been calling for President Trump to sit across the table from Kim Jong-un without preconditions, work out the differences, figure out a way to build this pathway towards denuclearization, because there is so much at stake. The people of Hawaii recognized this yesterday, experienced it personally. The leaders of this country need to experience that same visceral understanding of how lives are at stake.
Let's bring in Admiral Robert Natter, retired U.S. Navy 4-star admiral, former commander of the 7th Fleet in Japan. Admiral Natter, you had, nuclear weapons essentially under your control, obviously with the president's say-so, but you know how serious an issue this is. What do you think about what Congresswoman Gabbard had to say there?
Well, I think, number one, every administration since the end of the Korean War has attempted to solidify a permanent peace between the two Koreas. The reality is North Korea is not interested in dialogue except to advance their own development of their long-range missiles and nuclear weapons programs. So it takes two to have real dialogue here.
Are you saying that Congresswoman Gabbard's advice of sitting down with Kim Jong-un would be futile?
Well, again, if there's no one opposite on the table, yes. You've got to have both parties willing to sit down and come to some real decision making. And that hasn't been the case with North Korea since the end of the Korean War.
North Korea has reached agreements with the United States and others in the past on its military weapons programs and essentially just tore them up.
Well, they used them in order to get the pressure off them economically and then continue to do their own program development surreptitiously.
In the meantime, the residents of Hawaii got these notices on their mobile phones and so forth that they should prepare for a ballistic missile attack. Took 40 minutes to correct that misinformation. Give us your sense of why that happened and what should be done to prevent a repeat.
Well, first of all, I applaud the state of Hawaii and their leaders for testing and implementing this system. No human interface defense system is without the potential for mistakes. Their training is necessary. They found that out. Look, the reality is there were 0 fatalities and no reports of so much as a stubbed toe. Having said that, they've learned a very valuable lesson here that they need to improve their defense system and their early warning system. And I think that Hawaii's got the right approach to get this right so that if, God forbid, there is an attack, they will be appropriately warned.
Yeah, apparently it was a drop-down menu. The guy clicks on a bar at the top of his screen and a menu drops down and one of them says, test missile alert, and then one says, test practice missile alert. He picked the wrong one. Man, if I had a nickel for every time I've messed up a drop-down menu, I'd be a very wealthy guy. I would think that one of the solutions to this would be to come up with a better system that doesn't involve just one technician.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the military has plenty of systems whereby we've learned by our mistakes, we've learned through training how to improve these systems, and Hawaii is going to do that. They've committed to doing it, and I would argue that they're the first state in the union to take this seriously and address it. Other states ought to do the same thing.
In the meantime, we have to keep the pressure on North Korea.
Absolutely. With the help of China and Russia and through the United Nations, and also treat these sanctions very seriously. In the past, they've been porous. They can't afford to be this time.
You say with the help of China and Russia. Are they actually helping, in your view?
There is ample evidence that they have been helping. There's also ample evidence that they can do more. But we can do more as well. We can do it with banking. We can do it with shipping firms. We've got to make these sanctions stick.
Admiral Robert Natter, former commander of the 7th Fleet. It's good to have you on. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Up next, the story of a New Jersey family and how they came to learn that they owned a priceless work of art when Jamie Colby hosts Strange Inheritance. She's going to join us next. Plus, a bizarre crash that looks like a scene in an action movie. What sent this car flying into a second-floor dental office?
It was coming down the and very high speed, and I was putting gas. I heard a big boom, and what it did is they hit that, it hit there and it got launched.
Girl, it is Monday. Let's bring this. Top of the hour with Outnumbered. President Trump says Democrats are derailing talks to protect the so-called Dreamers as he again denies using vulgar language and defends himself against claims of racism. So who's really holding up the immigration deal? And who's to blame if this leads to a government shutdown on Friday?
Plus, a top Republican lawmaker wants that anti-Trump dossier declassified and says we need to know if the FBI used it to launch surveillance of the Trump campaign, whether we will ever get any answers.
All that plus Outnumbered in the middle. I wonder who it will be.
I have an idea.
See you.
Well, you know, a lot of strange items get passed down through generations. Sometimes they turn out to be worth a lot of money, and that's what happened to one New Jersey family when they learned they were in possession of a long-lost Rembrandt painting, one of the artist's earliest works. Well, now they are sharing their story on the Fox Business Network's Strange Inheritance. The host of that program, Jamie Colby, joins us now. Jamie, this is a fascinating and fun story to open the season.
For sure, right over the bridge, and these guys had absolutely no idea what they had. They thought it was an unremarkable, fairly ugly painting. They knew their grandfather used to go into the city to go on these expeditions and look for art. And when their mom passed, they threw it in the basement. They decided to make use of the ping pong table. And so they gathered some things up, brought it to John Nye, who looks like a relative of his, Bill Nye the Science Guy, and it went up for auction. Maybe it would bring $500. Wait till you see what happens.
Here is the moment. Well, you're talking to them about their memories of this particular painting when they were growing up. Here it is.
What was the painting of?
Somebody in a chair passed out, and there was two people trying to revive the passed out person.
That could freak a kid out, for sure.
I remember Thanksgiving or family holidays, I would always look at that painting and think,
I never even noticed that.
Yes, it was there. I always looked at it as a kid because I thought, why did we have a painting like that in our dining room?
Because Mom was a fairly good cook, and the person looked like they were sick. Rembrandt painted this painting when he was only 17 years old. It's part of a series of 5, all about the senses. This is the sense of smell. 3 of them were known to exist and in a very famous collection, the Leiden collection. This one was missing all these years in Europe. How it ended up in New Jersey, you have to watch to find out. And there's one more out there. We hope after the episode airs, someone looks in their basement and finds that too.
That would be terrific. So this thing goes up for auction. They're looking for what, 500, $1,000?
Somebody take this painting.
And even the auctioneers were a little dubious. Watch.
He was a cool cucumber. He was so calm. Every time I presented a bid, he would say, yes.
And all of a sudden said $5,000, and man, that happened in no time.
Are you thinking that the people on the phone are making a mistake, or they know something that you don't?
They know something that I don't.
And he says it's one of his career-making auctions. Wait till you see the excitement that happens with that. And the second one on Martin Luther King Day, I think it's important to recognize Nat Turner's efforts in the slave rebellion. This white family who was given the Bible that was used during that slave rebellion makes an interesting decision not to sell it, but to donate it to the Smithsonian African American History Museum. Beautiful people. 26 new episodes, 9 p.m. Eastern tonight and tomorrow night.
We'll be watching.
Thanks
Jamie
so much,
Colby.
John.
Thank you. Back in a moment.